Welcoming our session moderator, Mr. M.R. Prasanna, the consultant, arbitrator, and the mediator. And of course, who doesn't know him, a gold medalist, 7 years of being the head of the legal function, and over 28 years, prestigious associations, chambers of commerce and industry, and of course, he's a member of the International Bar Association. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Prasanna. And with that, it's a delight to be hosting you and inviting our panelists on board. Let's welcome Rajiv Chaubey, the Chief Legal Officer, ACC Limited. 2 decades of experience for you, Rajiv. In the fields of corporate laws, M&A, security laws, corporate governance, and so much more that you handle. Pleasure to have you. And with that, also inviting Dr. Sanjeev Ghemawat, the Executive Director, Legal and Group Company Secretary, Dalmia Bharat Group. Dr. Sanjeev, you've spoken to us in the Congress before, and we know that you have 3 decades of experience across industries, automobile, real estate, and more. And with that, inviting up next Vineet Bose, the Senior Vice President, Legal and General Counsel from the Voco Vistas Group. Well, Vineet, your key strengths, of course, you think out of the box. You're partnering with business with legal solutions by leveraging financial acumen and effective litigation management. Welcome on board. And with that, also inviting up next and the last, Parvesh Khetarpal, the General Counsel, Head Legal and Company Secretary, Feedback Infra. Well, Parvesh, a seasoned power and infrastructure industry counsel that you are, 19 years of experience. You take care of a gamut of activities in the legal, secretarial, and the governance domain. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And thank you to our session sponsor, Neemwash and Ashirwad there as well. And yes, finally now, taking a breath, and of course, before handing it over to our moderator, firstly, I would like to, really thank the entire panel for being really patient with time and being very understanding on that front. Having said that, it's time for the final discussion at GenNext, #GenNext 2021. Mr. M.R. Prasanna, happy to be handing it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shika. Thank you, Kriti and Ashwini, for being the forces behind this entire mammoth exercise called GenNext. I've been closely watching the kind of programs and topics and speakers that you have lined up. It's absolutely scintillating. And we are, in fact, what you call the curtain boys, who are going to bring the curtain down with this last panel discussion. And we will try and do our best. Good evening, ladies and gents. It is indeed a great pleasure to be the anchor for this panel discussion. And we have an excellent and diverse panel. Each panelist has rich experience in his respective field and also in the relevant business. In order that we get the best out of this panel, the team has been broken up into a few segments. We had originally planned to do 5 segments, but unfortunately, one of our panelists, Ashok from ArcelorMittal, had some very personal commitment and he could not extricate himself. So we are going to try and do as much as possible, given the time that we have. So we're going to look at manufacturing in the ecosystem of the regulatory landscape, the business landscape, then the kind of opportunities manufacturing has in terms of corporate and debt restructuring, and to some extent, what could actually mean in case of companies which have actually done very badly and facing bankruptcy. And we'll also look at employment, the kind of effect labor has in terms of running business. How are you going to manage labor, particularly during COVID times? And what is going to happen if labor code actually comes into force? Is the industry in a state of preparedness? So far the labor code is concerned. And of course, supply chain is an important aspect. Briefly, we will touch upon that as we go forward. The 2 waves of COVID-19 have adversely impacted business But as they say, necessity being the mother of invention, business has also reinvented ways of business, how it should be organized. And so survival becomes necessity and innovation becomes the mother. Regulation strangulation is an area of concern. The changes are expected from the hibernating labor code. How labor productivity gets impetus in the face of labor protectionism is yet to be tested. Financial impetus, one-time debt restructuring, they were all expected to pull the industry back on rail, but they are like quick fix issues, but have not really addressed the long-term revival issues. Product liability and product safety are interlinked in a way, but can be very challenging. The ecosystem within which the business operates in India compares less favorably when compared to the other countries. The legislature, the executive, and the judiciary all have a role to play in consistent, reliable decision-making and must weigh in together and not work at cross purposes. The NCLTs in India are overburdened. As a result, corporate restructuring and various other Companies Act initiatives are taking a long time to close out. And sometimes, because of that, the costs are being driven up. And sometimes even transactions fail because people lose patience in not getting a decision early on. Whilst vigilance is a virtue, there are vigilants who actually file PILs and question the decisions, which may apply brakes on some of the projects, particularly the greenfield projects. The grievance redressal mechanism available under the various laws are bypassed, and the issues are taken straight away to the courts. And sometimes the courts actually sit as appeal bodies even before the original decision has been made. These and many other issues of concern will be articulated by the panelists, and they will also share their view on India becoming next China in terms of manufacturing potential, and whether it is wishful thinking or a lot needs to be done before realizing that dream. With these introductory words, I shall set the discussion rolling by inviting panelists to make their individual remarks, the opening remarks. May I request Sanjeev to set the ball rolling with his opening remarks, please? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Prasanna, thank you very much, and I would like to thank Legal Era for inviting me to, for sharing my views on this very, very relevant and contemporary topic. Also privileged because Mr. Prasanna is moderating the session, so it's always privileged when he's there, because normally in his initial remarks itself he completely sets all the issues whatever are relevant in terms of for discussion. So always privileged, Mr. Prasanna, to participate in any discussion with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Prasanna, you have rightly raised all those relevant points, and I go to the very basic thought. For the last few years, we are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. And what is this Atmanirbhar Bharat all about? We say that there's a basic ingredient that it should encourage domestic manufacturing. Basic ingredients are that there should be a less reliance on imports. And above all, we should be globally competitive. And if I say that when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, these are the basic ingredients, but then as a thought, as a principle, as a conceptual framework, it attracts us, particularly the organizations who are in the manufacturing sector. And for the simple reason that manufacturing is one such area which would drive the economies in the times to come. Today, we are somewhere around 15% of GDP as far as manufacturing sector is concerned. And if I combine the industry sector also, it would be somewhere around, say, 26% of the GDP. But then considering the large demographic size, the large size in terms of the approach towards various innovations, huge startup population, I see there are opportunities available for manufacturing sector to grow further, and perhaps it should replace the services sector in terms of the contribution to GDP. Atmanirbhar Bharat is one such objective, a framework which is putting pressure on our minds that yes, we can achieve that. But there lies the problem. Because with the Atmanirbhar Bharat, it has undoubtedly given a new thought as far as the manufacturing sector or the industry is concerned. But the Atmanirbhar Bharat is also linked with the Archan Mukt Bharat. And the Archan Mukt Bharat suggests that are we really doing something about all this Atmanirbhar Bharat? Are we really can we really become competitive when we have that Archan Mukt Bharat issues? Because the Archan Mukt Bharat, unless you address the issues of the Archan Mukt Bharat, you cannot address the issues or you cannot achieve the Atmanirbhar Bharat. And why I say Archan Mukt Bharat? Archan Mukt Bharat is very simple. Simply speaking, all these manufacturing sector is these industries, they are in various areas all over the country. What is this Archan? Archan, simply speaking, is obstacles, hindrances. These obstacles are created by whom? By the government machinery, the executive, the babus, which we talk, the regulators. There are local politicians, or anyone with any kind of power. He will harass you. He will harass you in one or the other form. You've rightly pointed out the word vigilant. You have rightly pointed out the word vigilance. Yes, PILs are getting filed, but then how many PILs have the real relevant issues? Are they not extortionists? I think these are the issues which the manufacturing sector is experiencing. Now, if I just, because of in the interest of time, if I say that from the ecosystem of the manufacturing sector, if I talk about manufacturing sector today is suffering under various constraints. One is, of course, the regulatory mechanism or the role of the executive in terms of one or the other obstacles. So this is one major part. There are various legal frameworks apart from the labor laws related frameworks. There are industry specific legislations where you have one or the other problem. This is second problem. Third is you also raise the issue of the restructuring and NCLTs working in perhaps not in their optimum capacity. I think that is also not only the NCLT, various other the justice delivery system. I think that is also a big challenge as far as the growth of the manufacturing sector is concerned. So these are the challenges. But then before I end up in terms of this initial comments, and because the other participants would also be focusing on that, my thought here is the economic survey of 2019-20 specified various approvals and licenses which are required in the process of that manufacturing process. Do you know how many approvals or licenses or documents which are required? 7,000. Economic survey around 7,000. So economic survey is specified that. They have one. I will just like to quote one more because that attracted me. For opening a restaurant in Delhi, you need 45 documents. But then to get an arms license in Delhi, you need only 19 documents. So you just see this imbalancing. And there lies the answer that we need to do a lot of work to make India Atmanirbhar Bharat, or to focus on Make in India kind of initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. As usual, you're so passionate and so expressive in your feelings and sentiments, and I can see how you are concerned about the way the industry is actually being treated by the sort of the regimentation. Rajiv, we have come a long way from Industries Development Regulation Act. We have come a long way from MRTP. And hopefully we also come a long way from FIPB. And so I just wanted to know, do you really feel that these optically seemingly, impressive relaxations or deregulations have really freed you up? And what do you think where are you today? I appreciate your opening remarks on that, Rajiv.
Yeah. So good evening, everybody, and thanks, Mr. Prasanna. Thanks to Legal Era for organizing this wonderful, webinar spread over a few weeks. And first of all, one rider, that whatever I express is my personal view, does not reflect the, being from the legal person, I have to put this rider, does not reflect the views of my organization.
You can also, just a comment, Rajiv. You can give this statement on behalf of all of us. Huh?
All of us, yes, 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 yes. So taking on to the point, and as I, it's always good to hear from you, Mr. Prasanna, as well as my dear friend and senior in the profession, Mr. Gemawat. Very, very, thought-provoking views. But let me go back little, around 30 years back. So I think the major change, if we really see where India stands today, started way back in 1991 with the liberalization so called, and when we did away with the Industrial Development and Regulation Act. While many of the law students, when they read law, they may not be aware of what is IRDA, but I remember many years when I was a kid and my father wanted to buy a Bajaj Chetak or Bajaj Super. He had to, do a booking, and the scooter used to be available after 1 year, I believe, and in case you want urgently, you have to pay a black. So from the pre-1991 era to today, in sitting in 2021, 30 years, I think we have traveled a lot of distance. And for a growing population like India, where we need more jobs, and jobs, because government jobs are now dying, and most of us, the major population of the country, comes from either a agricultural background or a service class. So we need opportunities for the young population which is coming. And these jobs can only be created if the manufacturing sector does well, because that's the fulcrum of the entire economic activity. Because if suppose basic industry starting from say steel, and I, Sanjeev and Vinit represent one of the basic industry, cement, and there are many other industries like oil and gas, petroleum, chemicals, there's a long list. These are the basic industry. And when we talk of steel and power, we also need to understand that there is something called mining which happens behind the cement, steel, and other mineral based industry. Because unless we mine and get the raw material, we cannot produce cement. Cement can only be produced if you mine limestone. So in fact, very closely connected with mining is with manufacturing is the mining sector. And mining sector, as you know, has gone through a lot of trouble, because there are a lot of informal players in mining, especially with very famous is the iron ore mining issue with the Reddy brothers in Karnataka, and because of which Justice Shah Commission was appointed, and then the entire, the current government came back in 2014, riding on the wave of 2G scam, coal scam, and the entire mining scam. So I think if we really want to achieve a 5 trillion economy, which is the vision of our, Prime Minister, I think, as Sanjeev ji told, that we need to really bring the ease of doing business, which is being talked. I know that we have done a lot of good work, because of which we have, our ranking has improved by probably somewhere around 140, 42 to now 62, 63 in the global ranking of ease of doing business. But that is more at a, at a central government level, where ministry approval in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of FDI and, other, amendments. All these things, in my view, has to translate to the state level, because these manufacturing industries are always located in a remote location, because you require large tracts of land parcels. You need mines, which has to be necessarily, located in a remote location. And that is where I think, and we need to appreciate that when a, in a company, whether it is a listed company or an entrepreneur, when they decide a project to set up either a steel plant or a cement plant or an oil refinery, there is huge lot of planning which goes right from raising the capital to planning a project capex to ensuring that the production comes in time so that we can pay back to the lenders, the bankers, and we add value to the whole, organization. And that is how you do capital formation, asset formation, and that is where the government also gets their revenue. So I think very, very important is, while all service sector has been growing at a very fast pace, but the base is manufacturing. That I think, and this government has realized this, and that is where I think there is a lot of focus by the government on improving the infrastructure, or giving incentives to the manufacturing sector. But still,
Rajiv,
yeah.
Rajiv, I'll just request you to pause there, because you've given a lot of food for thought, because we're going to come back to you again
Sure.
in due course. Parvesh, the way business is being done today has been simply turned on its head. Now, the new age business has a different business model, but the manufacturing sector has its old economy business model, but significantly influenced by technology. In fact, information technology and IT controls have played a significant role in a positive way also, in the sense that they have improved efficiencies and they've actually brought in innovation. And there are so many other advantages of integrating information technology into your manufacturing. But the business to people connect, which is the most important thing. Business to business is understandable, which is well tested, but business to people connect is something which I believe is not fully understood. And I would like you to sort of give your opening remarks as to where you think business is going with respect to connecting with people and making people actually the beneficiaries of what business does for them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prasanna. And like others said, I'm delighted to be here with you all panelists, with you, Sanjeev, Rajiv, and Vinay. So as we are discussing on the manufacturing, manufacturing sector, so one point, in fact, I will borrow from Sanjeev, where he has referred, before I touch on this business to people part. So Sanjeev refers the Archan Mukt Bharat. So the thought came in my mind that yes, we need Archan Mukt Bharat, then only we'll reach to the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So and the culture in our system from last couple of years, where we are struggling with the Sarkari offices to get our work done, and bribery is a prevalent thing which we have to accept in our system. And where the foreign companies are coming, they are facing this challenge. Just quickly, one thought on that. Even we have suggested on different forums that why don't government come with a fast track window, where we have seen that if you don't pay the money, your work is not done. Why don't, and government knows everything, so why don't government come with a system that instead of paying the individual, then getting the work done, they should bring out a fast track window, pay to the government, that I'm bribing government. It's not word bribing, but I'm paying extra premium to get my work done early. And whosoever wants it early, they will pay it. Otherwise, they will be in the routine process. So that was one thought, and we have given these thoughts to the regulators also. Bring out with a fast track window that will certainly remove your bribery and this part in the system. Okay, thank you. And coming to the point on business to people, like I will repeat your line that you have said that necessity is the mother of invention. Yes, it's right. Necessity is the mother of invention. In fact, in our system, we have seen traditionally the manufacturing sector in India, manufacturers are largely relied on, you say B2B business model to serve their customer. But now they have realized that they don't have direct contact with the people, or they have little visibility on customer needs, and timely customers are coming with their personalized requirement and the personalized product in the system. So that process of B2B model has come to B2C. Like now the manufacturer or our industry has realized the requirement of B2C model. B2B model, the traditional model where you are selling to the other business and the other business are typically approaching the customer, so that there is a gap between manufacturer and the individual who is consuming, who is the final customer or consumer of that product. That gap needs to be covered. So like the other best side of the COVID-19 period, like though this B2C product model has come earlier, but this time has certainly given boost to the B2C model and coming to the B2P model as well. So even we have seen the survey in the market that 70% of the business users always try to use Amazon-like platform where they have all the information available for the product, or even not Amazon, they want to use the same kind of platform which helps them to decide for the product. And now manufacturers are also wondering that they can target the customer directly and can bring a platform which can pinpoint the pain points of the customer. The main is that which can identify the pain points of the customer so that they can bring the product which is directly required for the end user, and they made the platform so flexible so the individual can use that platform. So business to people requirement, if it's a overall about the business to people requirement in the business, we have seen that under B2B and B2C or B2P, the main difference under B2P is not only the business which decide of the product, it's the individual end user who decide the product. That's the requirement of today's world. And the business manufacturing hub, they have that approach to the end user. They have that flexibility to bring the product as per the requirement of the end user, and they have their own branding with them rather to be connected with the other brand and the mediator to use that. And you can say I will use that if you have your own branding, then you can say that it's time to get the creative juices flowing so that you can bring that product in the market. So we can certainly discuss about the need, challenges, and the impact of that in the next round to go. But this is the overall requirement of the B2C and B2C, B2P model, business model in the industry.
Mr. Prasanna, if I may just come in on this point, taking example of cement, which is a bulk product, which is generally sold through dealer network. It is never B2C. It is always business to dealer, and then dealer sales to the the customer, or there is a retailer. I think the business scenario is changing very fast, even for a product like steel or cement, because now I think most of the companies are having apps, and we are also looking at that we need to have a website through which we can directly deliver cement to the customer. So I think times are not far where even bulk material like cement or steel, which has been traditionally either B2B or except for the institutional
buyers,
where obviously it is B2C. I think we are seeing exciting times, and Sanjeev and both Vineet will agree with that we are seeing a very exciting times where different kind of business model is really already work is happening on that. I just wanted to
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Vineet, business, the new age business is all about top line. Nobody has any asset, and investors are falling over each other to invest billions and billions of dollars, and nobody knows how much of assets they have, and there is no bottom line. And every big new age company is actually talking about high valuation, but reporting big losses. So it is really enigmatic and somewhat mysterious as to how these things actually work. But I want to stay with manufacturing, which is a brick and mortar old economy. And in the old economy, it's a bottom line that matters. The top line is really something which people look at, but do not actually give great credence. But everybody looks at bottom line. And even the share market reacts differently. Like if Rajiv's company or anybody's company reports a particular loss in a particular quarter, there's a certain reaction that happens. Now, I want you to sort of give an overview as to how the manufacturing sector, particularly in the past 18 months of COVID times, has gone through a difficult period of actually marshalling the financial resources, number one. Number two, though banks are reported to have money and are eager to lend, but when it actually comes to lending, the manufacturer seems to be begging. And I just wanted to understand from you, from a pure financial point of view, as it affects manufacturing, where do you think is the problem, and what, in your opinion, is perhaps something that needs to be done from the point of view of debt financing? Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Prasanna. I think I am in the company of a very distinguished panelists. Both my seniors, Mr. Sanjeev is a senior, Rajiv ji is a senior. So, before I would like to take a step back first, to first understand the impact of the manufacturing in the ecosystem, which is very important. So when I say a manufacturing unit creates a very significant impact on the ecosystem in terms of promotion of capital formation, asset creation, local employment generation, local area development, because I've been part of this manufacturing industry for quite some time and I've seen it very closely. The growth of ancillary industry, state exchequer, road and railway logistics, service, innovation, export revenue, making an India brand, development of the reality sector around it, urbanization, big and medium-sized manufacturing entities invest a lot in the captive power generation, actually easing the burden of the DISCOMs. And apart from that, it has another kind of a trickle-down effect on the infrastructure, roads, transmission, gas pipeline, all those. This sector has a very, very unique value proposition. But this unique value proposition is somehow get muddled in this whole financial jargons of EBITDA and numbers. And the important point, what I would like to undermine here, of course, COVID has its stress. The manufacturing sector has dealt, the financial issues has come up. A lot of we had to go for a leverage financing and all that. But what has come actually, which has helped us sail through, is our relationship with our customer, our relationship with our stakeholders. Stakeholders, when I say the stakeholders, involves the government, state governments, and all that. Those relationship with has actually resulted. In fact, manpower, the way the manpower has contributed in these tough times. Of course, there were COVID restrictions, but most of the areas, the labor unions have cooperated a lot with the manufacturer. So I think I'm saying that the whole value proposition of this particular sector is not in terms of those financial bottom line, but what it gives back to the society in terms of the I have listed out some 18, 20 areas, including creation of public assets like dams and all that, which bigger industries creates. So those kind of a value contribution actually has helped them sail through in those tough times with a better interaction with the stakeholders. Of course, financing was always a challenge, but because they have the assets, they could create mortgage-backed assets and all that. So all those aspects has helped actually to create this industry sail through in this COVID pandemic times.
Thank you very much indeed. Sanjeev, managing human aspirations in the manufacturing sector, or for that matter, any sector, but we are concentrating on the manufacturing sector. Managing human aspirations is very, very difficult, particularly during difficult times. So if I may take the liberty of classifying the three competing constituencies, the one constituency is the shareholders and their expectation. The other constituency is the employees as a separate constituency. Within the employees, there is a subsect of three constituencies: the white collar, the blue collar, and what I call as gray collar. Gray collar are those people who are shop floor executives. They are neither sitting in the air-conditioned comfort, nor are they going to dirty their hand with grease, but they are people who are actually making sure everything goes well. Now, how does a manufacturing entity, how does a particular business house actually match and manage the expectations of these competencies? And what are the challenges that you think?
Well, Mr. Prasanna, very interesting question, but you have focused on two aspects of it. One is the shareholders, and the other is the category of employees and workers, in which you classify blue collar, white collar, and gray collar. Last 1.5 years has taught us something different, that we will have to go beyond this. When we need to go beyond this, that today the priorities are not only these two segments. Today the priorities, and COVID has taught us this, that priorities are that all your stakeholders. And the one major component of that stakeholders is your vendors, your suppliers, all your ancillary industries. Because ultimately all sectors, and manufacturing sector, if we are talking about particularly manufacturing sector, the manufacturing sector last 1.5 years, in particularly COVID duration, has taught us 3 L's or 3 M's. 3L is liquidity crisis. 3L includes labor and logistics. Liquidity, labor, and logistics, or if you turn it from an M standpoint, it's money, man, and material. On all these 3 aspects, we suffered. And we suffered essentially means that all this impact is happening from a for the livelihood of people or the lives of people. This is what we have learned in the last 1.5 years. Now we need to mesh the expectations, not only of these workers or labor, we need to mesh the expectations of that larger a larger group of the society also, which is vendors and other stakeholders, etc. And that is where the new concepts, they are addressing this. And how they are addressing is that if we say today that ESG is no longer a buzzword. ESG is no longer a buzzword. It might sound, initially it sounded like a buzzword, but then today organizations are following that. And organizations, while following the ESG, they take care of those expectations of the society, which include these stakeholders, which include employees, all those, workers, labor, vendors, stakeholders, etc. And this is in multiple forms. When I say that in multiple forms, then the ESG, environment, social, and governance, they address those very issues of this sections of the society which are part of the manufacturing sector. Now, again, I'm saying this might look as if work is not getting done. The fact is, you take the annual reports of nearly all 100 companies or 200 companies or the leading companies, you will notice that the organizations are working hard in terms of addressing the issues of these segments. Now, on a micro level, if I go in terms of addressing the issues of labor, etc., yes, traditionally there have been issues as far as labor part is concerned, in terms of because particularly for the industries which are in fossil areas, which are in the core sector, there are one or the other political considerations, etc. But then I have seen that last 3 decades or 4 decades, the disturbance as far as those locations, those areas are concerned, from the labor, etc., that situation is no longer there. Today, labor is also part of the management decision-making process, and you will notice that all manufacturing setups, they are having labor representatives, trade union representatives, and that becomes a part of the discussion process on a regular basis. And this discussion is not a formality. I have personally witnessed this, whereby the trade union leader, they are sitting with us on a daily basis for 30 minutes. They will just come and spend 30 minutes. Now, this is one way of addressing the issues as far as the concerns are concerned. So I think we are in a relatively a better world, where I think that relationship between the workers, labor, and the management, and for that matter, various other stakeholders also in the last few years, I think that the maturity level has gone drastically, well. And in the times to come, I think this would certainly help in terms of the manufacturing sector's growth. I would only like to add one small thing, because some discussions have happened. Rajiv also mentioned, Vineet and Parvesh also mentioned. I think what is more important is that for manufacturing sector to grow, the infrastructure, but Parvesh raised that issue, that as far as the infrastructure is concerned, that needs to be updated, up to date in terms of the achieving the manufacturing sector growth. Now, infrastructure itself is under, shambles today. Just one last line, that 22,000 lakhs crores, which we were to spend on infrastructure pipeline between 2020 to 2025, just to prepare ourselves for the next level of reforms or for the economic growth of $5 trillion economy. Where are we? We are nowhere. Who is to be blamed? Government came with those schemes, etc. But then somewhere we are lacking. I don't agree with the fact that the funding is an issue. Funding is not an issue. The entrepreneurs are not coming forward for one reason or the other. I think that needs to be addressed. And I think once we address that, because private sector is not being encouraged to come forward, I think that is what is required in terms of the growth of the sector. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I will pick up that last comment that you made to go back to Rajiv. Rajiv, I've also been part of a group which, ran a big industry, cement industry. And you're also in the same, area. But what bothers me, like Sanjeev mentioned to me, is that cement industry's fortunes are really linked to big spend on infrastructure, roads, bridges, and whatever you call it. Particularly the government spend on infrastructure is far more important, because cement business, retail business is nothing much to compared to the kind of business that you can have with infrastructure development. I'm not talking about Holcim as a whole. I'm just asking you from a cement industry perspective. Do you think that the cement manufacturing industry is really having a leg up with all these impetus on infrastructure? Particularly, Mr. Nitin Gadkari has been saying so many things. So do you think that there are sort of very bright days ahead for you?
Yeah. In my view, yes. If we look at the global consumption of China, which is one of our neighbor and one of the growing economies, while I don't have the figures right now, but the gap is huge. When I say huge, means it's huge. And we are a country which is still developing. It is still a lot of infrastructure has to be built. And forget infrastructure. In fact, even a lot of people do not have roof on their head. So they still need to construct houses. And when we talk of India, India is not these metro cities. India is far more if you travel down to the villages and where, I'm actually witnessing a lot of activity where, especially the government scheme called Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has actually given a lot of impetus to even the poorest of the poorest people to have a roof. So that is very, very encouraging. And while it is, cement has various, segments, as I would put, there is a huge retail segment also. Obviously, infrastructure and commercial, in the sense, if corporates do not put up projects, then the construction industry is also, because we, taking my company, we also have a business called Ready Mix business where we directly sell concrete. So I think the next few years, at least next 10 years, is very, very exciting for the company, for the country, because a lot of infrastructure has to build. But my only request to the government and to the lawmakers is that manufacturing is ready to perform, is ready to fly. Just remove all these small chains which is entangled with the industry. And there are so many examples with me readily available where I will say that, simple, I will give you a very simple example. We all operate and we are subject to a lot of environmental norms, including Air Act and Water Act. Now, one regular problem which I have seen, not only while I am in ACC or Holcim, but I have been earlier in Vedanta also, which is again into metal, mining business and resource business, is that you require a consent to operate, every year. why can't this consent to operate be given for 5 years? And this is one of the views given by Justice Swatantra Kumar, who was the earlier chairman of former Supreme Court judge, and he was the chairman of NGT also. Simple thing. While there is an automatic approval under the Water Act, but there is no automatic approval on the Air Act. Now this gives a simple chain that in case you have made an application for the renewal of the consent, unless it is refused, it will be deemed to be granted. Why? And for such reasons, small reasons, industries are, this is just in one example. I have 100 such examples. So I think there is a lot more to be done. And if all these initiatives are taken, I think nobody can stop us to, match the manufacturing capability of what China has today, because we have our own growing population. We have a domestic demand. We have the entrepreneurs. Money is not a problem, I think, but project execution, right from conceptualizing a project to execution to approval, is very, very important, because ultimately if a project, and one sector which I would like to touch upon is there is so much of stranded asset in power sector. Who is responsible for that? And how much of money is stuck today is of the banks. Ultimately, those money belongs to the depositors. And today government has to put in money to recapitalize bank. So ultimately if you see it in the totality, it is the government who is losing. Today, cement has a GST of 28%, which is highest, tax rate for any product. It's not a luxury item, but see the kind of revenue, and government doesn't want to reduce it because they are getting a lot of revenue from this sector. So I think overall winner will be the country, the government, the people. It will lead to creation of a lot of jobs, and we will become economic power. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv. Parvesh, you're, as opposed to hard infrastructure, your group is in infrastructure services company. It's more like infrastructure services. You are present in highway toll operations. You are present in providing O&M services to various power companies. And you're also in the process of doing a kind of a energy distribution. So I'm sure there are challenges in everything, talking about power, talking about energy distribution. How do you actually see, just to focus on power sector for that matter, how do you think that the power sector is actually faring today? And what do you think is something that needs to be done in order to make sure that this power sector actually becomes so robust that India can have every village lit up? Though they say every village has a light today, but still there is theft of electricity, there is agricultural electricity, which is free, and there are competing tensions so far as demand for electricity is concerned. So how do you actually take a high-level view of the situation now?
Yeah, in fact, power sector and the other infrastructure sector both are struggling in India, no doubt. So we were discussing, Rajiv has taken a point that next 10 years are the years where we'll see the growth in infrastructure sector in India, which is going to help all our panelists. Like three panelists are from the cement company. In any case, infrastructure development is going to give good revenue to cement companies, as well as to me. We are the company who are serving to the infrastructure sector, and it's good for the economy as well. In fact, before touching the power sector, my view that infrastructure sector development, including power sector, is a big need at this stage. We have seen China, if we have discussed on the China part, we have seen China around 30 years back, where they were and where they have reached. And this government, NDA government, probably lasts from 7 years. We can see the stability of the government in India. So they have brought so many policies and processes so that they can bring this infrastructure development in India as a need, as a requirement. And if we will lose this time, probably we are going to lose forever. And probably these 5 years and 10 years are required to make India as a manufacturing hub, for which we need the infrastructure development. So infrastructure includes everything, including power as well. So in fact, my experience in feedback group where we are helping the companies in infrastructure sector, including we are the distributor franchise in various states. And my 10 years experience with Lanco, where we have faced, we have developed big power projects and faced challenges in those power projects and could not succeed in those power projects as well. And where government is looking forward to have electricity at each and every home. So power sector, in fact, is like manufacturing sector. To set up a power sector is not an easy thing. We have faced many challenges, being the greenfield project. Land acquisition was a big challenge, which delayed our process. And other than land acquisition, then when these approvals are required, I will take one example. Where we need to take approval for boiler installation and setup. So boiler design is a confidential design with the company. So we were required to file boiler design and everything with the government department. And tomorrow you will see that all other companies, my competitors, have their boiler design with them. So no confidentiality available at every stage. So we were concerned, our investors were concerned, and companies were hesitant to give their design to the government and trying to find ways to get that approval, managing that approval. So those, we have seen the land acquisition, we have seen the compliances. Compliances means that getting the approval from the government. One example given by received consent to establish and consent to operate. And then when our projects were ready, there were no coal linkage and gas linkage for the project. That's the another challenge in our kind of companies, that our projects were not running at 100% CUF utilization of those projects. So that was a big challenge for us. Next, if we are producing the power and selling it to the government, distribution agents, distribution utilities has no money to pay us. So if your working capital is stuck for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, then you are nowhere. Your business is going to be shut and you will not be able to serve your investors, your bankers on that stage. Even we have seen when the government has come with the renewable policies, and we have seen in Telangana that 9 years payment for against the PPAs were pending at one point of time. So for the projects 5 megawatt to 100 megawatt, if they are not being paid by the government for 8 to 9 months, tomorrow they are going to be the NCLT. On the one side, government utilities are not paying you. On the other side, we brought that NCLT and IBC. And if you are not getting paid by the utilities, you are not paying to your lenders, you will be referred to IBFC only. So these are the challenges which we are facing. And on the overall infrastructure sector, which I see, other than the power sector which we discussed, where I see that this government has to come forward with the policies and the processes which bring the environment for the manufacturing business in India, which motivates the individual and the corporate houses to set up their manufacturing units in a big way, like China. We are comparing it with China, and political stability. We can see if it is there. So that certainly bringing those policies with the political stability will bring the foreign investor to come in India and to make that happen as a manufacturing hub in India. So it's not 10 years, but it's 3 years. 10 years is the implementation period, but 3 years are making those policies and bringing those policies in system, which will make our environment friendly for the manufacturing units to be established in India. And we can see from Delhi to 10 highways, if we are going on the 10 highways, all 10 highways till Delhi to Mumbai, there is an industrial hub for a particular segment. That probably we are looking forward to have the industrial hub, which will increase our employment, our value in the system, and export from India in a big.
Excellent. Thank you. Vineet, in a sense, you're also in a way connected with infrastructure, because your industry has backward integration in terms of having mines which you can operate, and of course the core manufacturing of cement, and then going forward you have a forward integration in terms of modern building materials, and also the question of ready-mix concrete and all of that stuff. Now, when you look at the three segments, like Rajiv mentioned, the backward integration is always full of challenges, because operating a mine and establishing a mine, getting a mining license is to some extent a very messy affair, in the sense that it's not a very clean thing. It's not a very real thing. It happens, it happens. But I want you to focus on your forward integration. How do you think your forward integration is actually helping this cement industry And how do you think, what does the future hold for your forward integration insofar as ready-mix and modern building materials are concerned? Are you dependent on the bulk consumer, or are you dependent on the retail consumer, who then is dependent on banks for loans, which again takes you back to the question of the lack of housing and the lack of impetus to housing? Over to you, Vineet.
So, Mr. Prasanna, as far as the forward integration is concerned in my segment, we are basically betting on the Indian economy. If I could put it in very simple terms, we are betting on the economy. We are, of course, betting on the infrastructure. We are very keen that the infrastructure, the government push on the infrastructure and housing segment, because everything has got a trickle-down effect with that. So, of course, for our ready-mix concrete, the developers, real estate has to grow. And when it comes to our cement and other, how the government policies in relation to housing loans, home loans, all those aspects have a very significant and direct impact on our forward integration. So I think, but most important, what I would like to emphasize is on the policy certainty. Or when it comes to policy certainty, and how I would like to just give an example from a policy certainty aspect. If an industry is set up, an industry is up and running, it has certain assumptions and it has some certain returns which it promises in terms of IRR to its shareholders. Now, if there is a one risk which we call entrepreneur risk, that any entrepreneur is ready to take. But when it comes to the policy related risks, so of course, there is a certain pricing which I would visualize for my product. There are certain, but my forward integration or my forward pricing, or how I would like to face the challenge, is very much dependent on my backward integration, which is how am I going to secure the licenses for the mines? Am I going to secure the fly ash for blending with my clinker? Third, am I going to have the right distribution network within a particular state? Because again, it all depends on very important factor. Right now, the cement industry is facing the problem of recovering money, because it's a huge receivables which are there in my company itself. It's quite a sizable, I can't disclose the number, but it's quite a sizable chunk of receivables. And again, everything is very much dependent when we brought this bankruptcy law or IBC and all that resolution plan. So all these factors which are very important, how all these interplay between all these factors will be very important. So of course, number one is the way the economy growth. Number two, how the infrastructure spend of the government goes. Third, how the government tax policies are there from the perspective of a home loan, how the banks, to what extent the monetary policy or credit policy of the banks are there. So all these factors will, and of course, how the state governments, the kind of local policies and all that, all these create quite a significant impact on my forward integration.
Thank you. This panel is simply amazing. I mean, I could continue talking, and Sanjeev, Rajiv, Vineet, and Parvesh, you guys have got fund of information, and I think we could have gone on for another maybe an hour or two for that matter. But time is always the killer. So to conclude this program, I have one common question to all four of you. You can make 2-minute comment on that. There is so much of being said that China is losing out. A lot of people are looking to India to make it a manufacturing base. And I don't like this expression, but they keep on talking about low-cost labor. It's some sort of, the expression itself sounds rather cheap to me. But anyway, be that made, maybe a jargon that is used. But the question that I'm going to pose to each one of you, please give your own answer, is can India really become China and become a much better manufacturing base? Can it overtake China? Sanjeev, you can start off.
Well, I would not like to compare India with China. I think the situations and circumstances are too different. The fact remains, and I don't want to compare, but then yes, the kind of respect which Chinese companies get, all of across the world, I don't think that we would be reaching, or we should be comparing ourselves with that, because there's a mixed kind of views, and Chinese products are not being considered great. In some of the areas, they have done exceedingly well. So I don't want to compare myself with China. But the fundamental issue is, do I have the competence to become the manufacturing hub of the world? Answer is yes. And it's not on the basis of the cheap labor. Today, Indian labor is not cheap. Just think about this, that all those textile manufacturers, or the textile manufacturing which used to happen in India at one point of time, today all those bases are getting shifted to Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and other countries. So Indian labor is not cheap. But then what India provides is, one is a democracy, a reliable justice delivery system, and above all, the workforce which is young, the workforce which is well educated. And I think the future of the manufacturing process would not be a manual manufacturing process. Future of the manufacturing process would be largely dependent on artificial intelligence, machine learnings, and so much of technology and the innovation. And there, I think the Indian demography, Indian young population, that would be contributing a lot. So from all those fundamentals part of it, I would say that India is in a right position in terms of becoming a manufacturing hub. One thing which is more important is that what Prime Minister says, I think that needs to be percolated down to the whole machinery. When Prime Minister says that the wealth creators need to be respected, I think that is what is required. The Indian businesses, industry, manufacturing organizations, they need to be respected. They are not here only for making money or making profit. They are here for economic growth of the nation. Please respect them. And the moment you respect them, you will find that we can do wonders, because we have almost all other fundamentals available in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Excellent summation. I think over to you, Rajiv. Go ahead.
I think Sanjeev has already touched upon everything, but I think I'm very, very confident that India as a country will grow, and manufacturing will also grow, and it will be a much more sustainable manufacturing. As Sanjeev has raised this point of ESG, companies in India are now much aware of their responsibility on the ESG front. And I think it's a journey. We opened up in the year 1991. It has been 30 years. And whether it is the power sector, in power sector, a lot of work happened with the amendment in the Electricity Act in 2003. But still today we have issues on transmission. Parvez touched about, distribution company being bankrupt in terms of they don't have money to pay. So just, but yes, as a country, you look at the situation which we had 20 years ago. There were huge load shedding. Today, there is no dearth of power. I think the vision of Prime Minister to get electricity in every village, I can vouch for it, that availability of power in the villages has increased. So a lot has happened. It's a journey, and we are on the right track. But if you ask me, couple of issues which comes to my immediately, which needs to be resolved. One is land. Land is a very, very complex subject today. While there is a lot of reforms in mining, I get a mining lease, but if I don't have surface right, I can't start mining. Government expects me to start the mining in 2 years. Practically not possible. So I think intent is there, but intent needs to be further acted by the state government, as Sanjeev was mentioning, that it needs to percolate. So all the state government also needs to be, on the same page as where the central government is in terms of ease of doing business for the states. And I think we are there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very well said. Okay, Parvesh, your concluding remarks on that question.
So as my topic touched with the digitalization and use of technology in the system. So as Sanjeev also touched that, yes, if we are not comparing with China, we should not compare us with China, but yes, we can say we can take some points which China has done in the last couple of years if useful for us. No doubt that we have seen that China has developed a system where they have made the mass production and dumping kind of thing. So yes, if we can develop tomorrow that system, so dependency on us will be there and whole world will be dependent on us like they are dependent on China. We have labor available, not cheap labor, but yes, young labor is available with us. That will help us in that. And coming to the point that now manufacturer has to choose or give up their traditional way of manufacturing. Now the concept is there for the digital factory. So digital factory system should be there, that they have to come with the artificial intelligence, machine learning. So the human interface will be less, and they can bring out the production in such a way that without human interface, the mass production can happen in the system. They should come out with their AI-driven services. They should come up. I always say it 3 A's, that AI-driven services, a digital brain, and alerts to the driven actions, that they will find out what is going to happen in the system, and they can take action, proactive action before happening of any instance.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the last line on that. So we can certainly see India as a manufacturing hub in the coming years. Yes.
Thank you. Vineet.
Yeah. So thank you. So I would just like to start. One of our former Prime Minister used to say that verify but trust. And I would like to now say it should to be actually, if India doesn't want to become a big China and all that, as I agree with Sanjeev, it's more about my necessity to have a double-digit growth. If I need to have a double-digit growth, I should actually be trusting but verify. And I'm just giving you a quick example of an instance which I have seen in my experience. An entity of us had a letter of intent for a mining lease, and that letter of intent has a condition that within 3 years you have to come up with a cement plant. DDS was yet to be executed, but you have a LOI. Fine. The company has in 3 years' time, they have come up with a 2 million ton cement plant. Once the plant is up and running, the state has cancelled the LOI. XYZ reasons, there could be some Charagaha land in between or whatever it may be. Ultimately, that entity faced multiple issues because of this, and it went into a resolution IBC process. A resolution applicant came on board. Fine, very good. The resolution applicant paid. The banks have taken some haircut and they have paid, and the company. So there was a moratorium period. During that moratorium period, none of the state or central agencies were gunning against them. So that resolution applicant came up with the assumption, okay, the LOI of mining lease is under dispute. Fine, I may still get a limestone. Maybe I can clinker, I can buy clinker, whatever may be the business model he might have visualized, and he get that. He was a successful applicant, and the new management took over. Now, when the new management took over, the same state government came back and say, look, the plant in which it is running, there is a forest area in between, so they cancel the CTO. So what has happened in this whole process is you don't have a central and state needs to have the skin in the game. Actually, unless and until both need to have a skin in the game and both works collaboratively, any kind of a decision, like when you talk about debt restructuring or IBC, it's all about creditors and all that. But ultimately, it's good money after bad money. what needs to be done is that that platform need to be broader, stakeholders needs to be come up with a pre-packaged solution and then go to that. So that is in, one of the things which I would say. And the third, which is very important, is scale. Without scale, you have seen the textile industry, our textile industry got almost suffering because the countries like Vietnam and even Bangladesh for that matter has scale. And when they can do an operation in that scale, why can't we? So with all these resources. So the point is that they ultimately the trust deficit. And I have talked about policy certainty. I will also say that there should need to be a policy simulation. For example, we are gung-ho about the PLI, these PLI schemes and all that. But the issue is that right now, nobody is focusing. Right now, there is a target of 500 billion. But after 2 years, somebody will come back. Oh, we may have the target of turnover is being met, but the value addition is not coming in the country. And then they will go for a retrospective change in the rules. And then the whole uncertainty. So you have to simulate what you want, what your mission is there, and then simulate it. Something I think that is very important.
Hey guys, you're absolutely brilliant. You rocked it. Fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed. My job was easy. I was just throwing questions at you people, and you people did all the hard work of fielding those questions and giving such fantastic and very logical and convincing. And sometimes your thinking out of the box also came through. And I'm really delighted. Sanjeev, Rajiv, Vineet, and Parvesh. I'm extremely grateful to all of you for having logged in, although a little later in night. And then without any kind of loss of energy and also the enthusiasm, you people actually made this panel come across brilliantly for Legal Era. And thank you, Legal Era, for making this possible. And over to Shika.
Thank you, Mr. Prasanna. Grateful
Thank you,
to
sir.
you for nicely moderating this, and all the panelists as well. Thanks a lot. Always privilege and pleasure to to be the panel where you are there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Prasanna, thanks much. And Dr. Rajiv, I remember you saying, and I agree with you, I second that when you said it's always such a lovely experience when Mr. Prasanna is the chairperson of the panel. I have myself, we have together have had so many fond memories of meeting him on ground, and I so hope that happens sooner than soon, meeting all of you, in fact.
Yes.
So panel, thank you very much. Exactly. So panel, I would like to say that, thanking you without being stoppable, because you all were refreshingly honest, and you fortified us with yet another powerful conversation about matter of priority, manufacturing, law, next, legal trends, and more. Such a mindful take I heard on the business to people as well. So thank you very, very much, and wishing you a lovely evening ahead, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.